Welcome to Pandora, my 1,000-gallon cloud rainforest vivarium, a personal biological project of mine, where I've created an entire tropical ecosystem within glass, full of exotic plants, fungi, and creatures of all kinds, fearsome and beautiful. But it's been an insane past 2 weeks in the rainforest, which seems to be incessantly changing and evolving before my eyes. But as an observer of this tropical ecosystem, I've learned that Mother Nature always has her own set of rules. And sometimes, natural law doesn't quite carry out as expected. It has been a tough week in Pandora, riddled with mystery, revelation, and death that I completely didn't expect. This is the crazy story of how some of my favorite creatures in my giant cloud rainforest vivarium had lost their lives, but not without the biggest plot twist that will leave your jaw on the floor. Welcome to the Season 2 premiere of my Ecosystem Vivarium series, where it seems chaos reigns supreme in the circle of life, here on the Ants Canada Ant Channel. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. It was Pandora's age of Arachnida, and Lady Deathstrike, our resident giant huntsman spider, was hugging her second egg sac now. This egg sac was a bit of a surprise, because Lady Deathstrike had already given birth to an egg sac, which gave rise to a huge team of babies that I already released into Pandora, who are now growing up in the forest, feeding on little insects. But this second egg sac meant another team of babies were on their way from sperm she had saved from her one mating months ago. Or it was possible this egg sac was a dud, full of unfertilized eggs. Or another possibility was that she managed to mate again with another male, while escaped into my home in the last episode. Whatever the case, I would be keeping my eye on Lady Deathstrike and this new mysterious egg sac. Now I didn't know it yet, but this egg sac wasn't the only surprise Easter egg I'd be stumbling upon in the rainforest this week. Little did I know, I was in for the greatest surprise. It seemed like a typical day in the rainforest. Up on the rock wall was Smaug, our resident sun skink, basking under the sun lamps. He was the apex predator of the lands and loved being high up where he could survey his kingdom. But ew, Smaug, there's an earthworm up there. Gross, but weird to see it all the way up here. Oh, never mind. Down the waterfall it went. Yay, food for the crabs. When not sunbasking, Smaug is usually at ground level, hunting for insects all morning, and once full, disappears below ground into his extensive subterranean burrow. All around him, the main prey animals in the forest, of course, were the crickets, of which there was a great abundance. Crickets of all ages, from tiny hatchlings to adults, frolicked Pandora's lush landscape. The air was full of male cricket crooners, all hoping to attract females through song, who were either hiding and listening from afar, or were being actively approached by the chirping males. Those males that got serious riz were able to mate with a female. It just takes a moment, and once done, the males deposit their spermatophore, that little white sac, into the females, thereby securing a new generation of Pandoran crickets to come. I loved watching the females deposit their eggs into the soft soils. The females seemed to look super relieved to lay their eggs, using their long ovipositors stabbed into the ground. The crickets were amazing at keeping plants trimmed, especially the mosses. Apparently this species of cricket is also known to eat meat from time to time, but I haven't seen them eat other insects for nourishment. At least not yet. Swarming nearby a female cricket was a mass of ants. It was the Terra Raiders, the resident marauder ants. I always loved seeing them out and about because this colony has truly beat the odds, having stood up against 2 enemy invasive ant colonies in the past, like the Dark Horde, the invasive black crazy ants of the lands, who, by the way, were strangely nowhere to be seen now. I could only see a few workers wandering around. They were last seen moving their brood into the stump, but wherever they were hiding, they must have been laying low in order to grow their numbers in secret. But the Terra Raiders were the current ruling ant species of Pandora. The interesting thing was that the marauders left the living crickets alone, but once the adult crickets expired to breathe their last breaths of air, the marauders were always the first on the scene to clean up, to take the dying insects home to their nest. The Terra Raiders were the best cleanup crew for dead insects, and as I found out later, a little too good. Rocksteady, our resident rhino beetle, was on the move, heading somewhere. He's been extra restless these days, and I wasn't sure why. The only thing I could think of was that he was looking for a female. And indeed, I'm still looking for Mrs. Rocksteady. Hang in there, buddy. She'll be coming soon. Up on the vine, I caught sight of our principal flyer in Pandora, the pretty damselfly. And check out how she's been able to deal with the periodic rainstorms that blow through. Clever girl. The rains have interestingly welcomed some newcomers to the rainforest. Newcomers that were neither animals nor plants. Fungi were now seen thriving all over the place. Have a look. From really small mushrooms growing in the soils, to other cool orangey mushrooms growing out of the driftwood, other mushrooms growing within the darkness of wooden caverns, and oyster-type mushrooms underneath the Hallelujah tree stump. Seeing these mushrooms everywhere was very promising, as it signified a healthy ecosystem. Some call fungi the dark matter of the biosphere. We know they're around and important, but we just don't completely understand how yet. We do know that fungi connect root systems and help with communication of plants. Some have formed symbiotic relationships with other organisms, and some are members of the microbiota within the guts of animals, helping with digestion, including us humans. Fungi are like the glue to an ecosystem, connecting all life forms. I then caught sight of the most significant herbivore of the rainforest, Stanley, the bush cricket. He was still nestled in this philodendron plant. I found it strange that he was still here. He had spent the past week here in this spot. Usually I'd see him somewhere up in the canopy, particularly at night when he scouts for new leaves to chew up and vines to murder. I suspected that with rising temperatures, due to the approach of summer where I live, he was beginning to be less active and hungry. Interestingly, many animals in my country go into a sort of hibernation/self-preservation period when temperatures rise, a process known as estivation. Then, wake up once the rainy season hits, around May, when temperatures get cooler. Rest well, Stanley. Love you, buddy. But while some creatures were going into hibernation due to the seasonal change, other creatures were loving the heat and becoming much more abundant and visible in the rainforest. My greatest repulsion, a land planaria, slithered around the mosses. These were carnivorous flatworms that fed on tiny insects, and here they were feasting on the abundance of baby crickets, probably even baby huntsman spiders, and possibly ants. I couldn't get over how many there were in Pandora, and I wasn't sure if they even had any natural enemies. I was hoping perhaps the tiny frog I recently discovered in the last video would eat them. Who knows? But these things needed to be controlled at some point, and I currently didn't know how to go about doing that. Any ideas, guys? Speaking of worms, in the last episode I showed you a black long thing I suspected was a horsehair worm. Some of you insisted that I remove it, but I'm sorry, There ain't no way in hell I'm touching it. It's still there. I'm just hoping it's something else and not a horsehair worm, and just decays there over time. But if there was one creature to completely explode in numbers, to hit the rainforest scene, even more so than the planaria, it was these guys. A millipede crawled like a robotic toy train along the rainforest floor in search of decaying material to feed on. I don't know when it started to happen, but the millipede seemed to have just exploded out of nowhere. It blew my mind just how many millipedes there actually were in Pandora now. What was once an infrequent sighting of these little millipedes was now a sighting no matter where you looked in the rainforest. I could see them mating, feeding on dead leaf litter on the forest floor, breaking down pieces of vine fallen from Stanley's past meals, even feeding on dying crickets. What's crazy is that, like the planaria, these millipedes don't have any natural predators. They're toxic, producing a ton of poisonous substances, including hydrochloric acid, hydrogen cyanide, various organic acids, and more. So nothing dares to eat them. Not frogs, not spiders, not even Smaug. So guess for now it was Pandora's Age of the Millipedes as well. I then caught sight of the Green Reaper, our praying mantis, who was hiding in the shadows of the driftwood. I was surprised to see how skinny she was, seeing as not too long ago, she was fat, having eaten a male mantis I tried to introduce her to, so they could mate. Guess she pooped him out already. Oh yeah, and guys, speaking of male mantises, I have some exciting news to share. Some of you may recall that I captured another mantis that I was hoping to be a male. A lot of you mentioned that based on videos, she looked like a female. Well, I ended up keeping her anyway, and I'm so glad I did, because the mantis had its final shed, and look at it now. It had wings, but what was most exciting was that it was much smaller than the Green Reaper, the same size as the male mantis I tried to introduce. I was so happy to know that it was a male, or at least it looked exactly like one to me, only it was green. But in this species of marbled mantis, they have two color morphs, a green and a grayish version. But before attempting to mate it with our female, I had to double check with my mantis expert friend first, and I sent him photos to check out. Meanwhile, I made sure the mantis was well fed, because if it was male, it would have a very huge and dangerous job ahead. I couldn't wait to find out the truth about its sex, so I could attempt mantis mating number 2. But little did I know, things weren't as simple as I thought, and a huge shock was in store for me very soon. Night fell, and all seemed normal in the rainforest. So beautiful and spiritual. I watched a cute small snail sliding along the glass. I always found snails to be hypnotic in the way they moved, so slowly and gracefully, seemingly carefree, as they went about in search of plants to chew on. It found a fern leaf and took a few nibbles from it. What was super cool was seeing the breathing mechanism through its shell. Guess this is the equivalent of a diaphragm in humans, moving air in and out of its body. I truly love snails. But speaking of slimy critters, it looks like this carpenter ant got caught up in someone's slime. How weird. Was it slimed by a snail? A land planaria? A frog? The tree frogs were also out on their regular hunt for food. One thing I found interesting was that Kermit here, a male tree frog, had his throat partially inflated. I wondered if before I stepped into the ant room, I had missed him singing. If this was the case, it meant that the approaching summers were also tree frog breeding season, and I knew we could possibly expect some frog eggs in the pond. Couldn't wait for that. It was then that I discovered a movement under the stump. It was a termite. How awesome! We have clear visual confirmation now that the termites are indeed still alive and okay. The termite patrolled the small mounds its colony was making beneath the stump. I wondered if these small mounds would eventually grow to massive termite mounds as the colony grew. We just have to see. But I was so happy to see our termites were still alive and well in Pandora, as they were important players in our rainforest ecosystem. Lady Deathstrike lay in the same spot, right at the front glass of the vivarium, still hugging her egg sac. It was amazing to me how dedicated she was at ensuring the next generation of spiders successfully hatch. That is, if these eggs were indeed fertilized. What was weird was that through the moonlight glow, it looked as though the egg sac was hollow, but it was just probably because the eggs were still transparent at this point. Through this entire process, Lady Deathstrike would not be eating, only holding onto this egg sac and running away at any sign of danger. No matter what, she could not let go of this egg sac, and she would be 100% committed to its protection for the next few weeks until the spiderlings emerge, if ever. Only time would tell. Up high in the canopy, I smiled when I spotted Stanley. Hey, guess he got hungry and was now back up in the vines, standing among droves of acrobat ants. I wasn't used to not seeing Stanley climbing around at night, and I'd already gotten used to him taking down all the newest plant shoots and leaf buds sprouting from the vines. I loved hearing the sounds of his jingle bell type chirps at night, singing into the darkness in hopes for a female to show up to mate with him. And indeed, I was checking the windows of the ant room every night for females who may have heard his song from outside. I was determined to eventually find him a mate. But it seems Mother Nature had other plans for Stanley, because little did I know, this would be the very last night we would be graced with Stanley's plant-controlling services in Pandora. A commotion caught my eye on the forest floor. What is that? My heart dropped into my stomach when I realized what I was looking at. A cricket was eating something rather aggressively, and though it looked like a dead leaf, I knew it wasn't. A leg. No! Stanley! A Terrorator Ant Major and the cricket were fighting over the remains of Stanley, whose abdomen had been completely consumed. My heart broke, watching Stanley's half-eaten body being thrown around by the cricket. No, Stanley! This was not how I imagined him to go. I watched as the ants continued to battle with the cricket over Stanley's carcass. The cricket eventually dragged Stanley away from the ants so it could eat in peace. But that was when a male cricket, who at first wanted to sing to the eating female, decided to chase the female away and take full advantage of the feast. Poor Stanley. I don't know how exactly he died. Was he sick? He couldn't have been bitten by Lady Deathstrike, who was now over by the pond, still clutching her egg sac. If she ate half of Stanley, she would have had to drop her egg sac. I don't think it was her. Could it have been Smaug, seeing as Stanley had been hanging out in Smaug's territory lately? Or could it have been the natural end to his life? So many unanswered questions, but it hurt to have to say goodbye to our manly Stanley this way. No. Stanley.
Hey man, it's JP. So I took a look at your photos of the mantis, and I'm sorry to say, but your mantis is a female, not a male. Based on the last segment of the abdomen, she is 100% female. It's possible for mantises to be smaller as adults if they don't eat as much. Anyway, best of luck. I hope you find a male soon. Peace.
Hey man, thank you JP, I appreciate that. I'll just have to keep an eye open for a male, I guess. Ciao. I checked the leaf litter to see if I could find any of Stanley's remains. All I could see was leaf litter now. But then, I spotted a peculiar shiny wing in the soil. Wait. No. The Green Reaper? I refused to believe it. This had to be a wing of a damselfly or something. I looked around, and as I found more and more pieces of praying mantis body parts, another wing, and a claw, I knew I had to face the truth. Our Green Reaper had also passed away. The fact that the body parts were scattered around could have meant that she was killed by Smaug or something, or that the crickets had simply tore her up and scattered her remains around the vicinity of her death. Or both. Could it have been a horsehair worm breaking out of her in the pond, then crawling onto land where she proceeded to die? The exact cause of death, once again, was unknown, and I was so sad that I couldn't say a proper goodbye, nor look at her alive one last time. With the loss of both Stanley and the Green Reaper, it was definitely a sad, sad week in Pandora, and I broke down and cried. The next day, I opened Pandora to place in some new vines I'd collected to string up in the canopy to replace all the vines that Stanley had eaten and destroyed while he was alive. And that was when I saw something that I completely didn't expect. Wait, what is that? No way! An Ootheca! This was a mantis's egg sac. The Green Reaper's egg sac. OMG, our praying mantis had laid an Ootheca before she died. And after talking to my mantis hobbyist friend JP, apparently egg laying is very physically taxing on a female mantis, and it is common for female mantises to pass away after laying an egg sac. JP believed this was most likely the cause of her death. But now some of you may be thinking, it's unfertilized. We all watched her eat the male. It's impossible that the Green Reaper had mated, right? Well, AC family, this isn't completely accurate. I have an admission. During the filming of the mantis pairing episode where I attempted to intro the male Grey Reaper to our female Green Reaper, you may recall the mantises lived together without actually approaching each other for about a day. And in the moments leading up to the male being eaten by the female, I did film the male's approach. But what I didn't mention was that there was quite a gap of time between when the male was here, approaching the female, and when the male was here and the female was already facing him. About a 2-hour gap or so. Problem was, I was so busy trying to multitask, editing the episode at the same time to make the weekend upload, and just kept checking on the pair every few hours, seeing as they seemed to be moving mere centimeters per hour. But having to multitask like that meant that I couldn't watch the pair through the entire process, and thus, there were several points when the male could have actually mated with the female without me knowing. And if it did happen, my guess was it most likely happened between this shot and this shot while I wasn't around. Or even overnight or early morning while I was still asleep and not around to catch them in the act. Furthermore, some of you mantis experts commented that despite the male's head and upper body being eaten, sometimes the male's abdomen is capable of reaching over and fertilizing the female while being eaten, and that sometimes male mantises pretty much throw themselves at females to be eaten, just so they could reach over and mate, while decapitated. I looked back at the footage and couldn't tell if that was actually happening. So as you can see, just like Lady Deathstrike's egg sac, there was still promise with our Green Reaper's egg sac. Only time would tell if baby mantises would hatch from it. Inside, I hoped so. But overall, this entire situation showed me once again that all of life is involved in a constant cycle. It's the circle of life, as they call it. We watch animals start young, grow up, mate, and reproduce if they're lucky, then die to provide life energy to other life forms on the same cyclic biological journey. As I caught Rocksteady feeding on a piece of rotting fruit alone, I wondered if perhaps the reason he had been wandering so much lately was because he was searching for his cricket best friend, whom we would always oddly spot right by his side, wherever he went, no matter what he was doing. But sadly, crickets don't have the same lifespan as rhino beetles, and it broke my heart to see Rocksteady feeding alone, with no cricket friend, who had now long passed by his side this time. The summer temperatures also saw the strange disappearance of all of Pandora's grasshoppers. The green grasshoppers that we watched grow up were now nowhere to be seen. I began to suspect that the increase in temperatures due to summer approaching may have marked the natural end to the grasshoppers' lives, and perhaps Stanley's life, and even the mantises. There are many creatures in the world that live only for a season before passing away, bush crickets, grasshoppers, and praying mantises included. As heartbreaking as this was a reality to accept, I knew it was necessary. With no grasshoppers and Stanley around, now all the plants could flourish for the next few months before temperatures cool down again and such creatures start to make a comeback or grow into adulthood. New seasons bring new animals, which bring new ways for an ecosystem to cycle its nutrients. Life is never static. It's never owned by one creature or life form, but borrowed for a particular length of time, then given up where it flows back to the system. The Knights of Pandora just won't be the same without Stanley's loud jingle bell chirps. But I know the sounds of jingle bells will be soon replaced with the calming chorus of tree frogs who will be entering their breeding season. I will also miss seeing our majestic mantis swaying in the wind, but hopefully we'll get to see tiny green and gray reapers scuttling around the rainforest, as well as a ton more huntsman spiders. In terms of the smaller, now confirmed female mantis, I released her into Pandora to live out her remaining days within the Vivarium and take our Green Reaper's place in the rainforest. In no time, she captured a cricket and began to feast. Despite the tragic events, I knew life would simply go on in Pandora. And as I was mourning the loss of our beloved critters, I took notice of how lush Pandora still was after all this time. Different now from when we first began, but still ever beautiful, majestic, and alive. And it was then that I realized, you know what? All the creatures that come to die in Pandora never actually leave our rainforest. They become the soil, the plants, and the vines. They become the creatures that eat them, the creatures that eat those creatures. They become the minerals in the groundwater, the gases in the air, and even live on in their offspring. Their spirits remain very much so alive in the rainforest forever, just in new energetic arrangements. Thank you, Stanley, Green Reaper, and Grasshoppers, for blessing us with the best of memories. Through you, millions of us around the world have gained some of the deepest of insights into nature and even ourselves. We'll see you on the other side. Until then, we'll miss you greatly. Love, your creator of worlds and the AC family. I spotted a swarm of ants on the forest floor. They looked like a new species of ant I hadn't seen yet in Pandora. Or... wait a sec. No, they're not new. These were the Terra Raiders. But why did they look different and not as smooth? As I looked closer, that was when I realized what I was actually looking at. Oh no! Mites. Vote in my community tab to affect this story.